Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind UK, the reunion. Let's watch and see what happens and see what comes flying out of my face as I watch.
I fell in love with about Stephen, and one of the big things in the pods that really drew me to him was when I said I quit my job, how he reacted to that. He was like, I can't wait to support you. And I said I wanted to start my own agency, but the support wasn't there. Then we had agreed that we were going to split our time between Belfast and London.
Okay, so she's saying that he promised or said that he was gonna, I think, financially support her as she worked on building a business in London. I think that's what she's saying, because she would have to give something up to move. And then she's saying that wasn't there. So then I had to figure out how I was gonna live between Belfast and London for the first year.
So that left us in a position that we were doing long distance, which was not the plan from the word go. But the communication was awful. There was no consistency in Stephen's behaviour towards me and the relationship.
So, Stephen, what's your view?
So she's saying that communication was awful, I think meaning that he wasn't communicative, he wasn't reaching out, or he wouldn't respond. So, that's too bad.
Primarily was the long distance. What we underestimated the added pressure of what the long distance was caused. We both left our jobs to find love. That's why I fell for Sabrina. Sabrina started her own company and took off, and it was brilliant. And we just lost our spark. Our communication expectations of each other were very different.
So it sounds like her expectation for communication was more frequent. And yeah, even if we knew what her expectations or what he was doing, it wouldn't really, people tend to personalize this. It really has more to do with how they worked it out. If there was a big difference, like she wanted to communicate by texting and talking on the phone multiple times every day, and he was like wanting to talk on the phone just once every couple days or something, we tend to see a situation like that and think like, all day? That's terrible. Or, yeah, of course you want to talk all day. Everyone can have their preferences, and it doesn't mean attachment insecurity or not. I mean, there's a chance it is related to that, right? Either avoidance or preoccupation, but I'm not hearing anything yet. He also mentioned the spark had been lost. So that makes me wonder if once they were separated, the feeling started to fade, and his natural tendency is to not communicate a little bit. So, okay, so this is an hypothesis. We'll see if we can hear any data to support this, because I wouldn't be surprised if this is what happened. That they had some conflict about that setup of him supporting her, and he said something like, I can't support you because I can't afford that, or I would rather not because I want everyone to contribute or something. I don't know. Or she thought that he had promised it when he didn't think he had promised it, or whatever. And so that caused a little bit of a riff. And then as she started to want communication, some reassurance, and he was already feeling a little defensive or something, and maybe he starts to avoid a little bit, and he starts to lose a little bit of that spark, that triggers her, even if she's not preoccupied, to feel that distance and that worry. And of course, they don't know each other very well. They're married, but they had an in-person relationship for a couple months, 3 months tops. And so she's in Belfast, and she's reaching out, and he's maybe legitimate reasons not communicating back as quickly as she wants. And then she gets upset, and then she starts to become hostile, and maybe understandably. He gets upset about that, and you just rinse and repeat that, and eventually the spark is gone from one or the other, or both, and then you get what you get. So let's see what we hear.
I lost all my customers.
But it wasn't even just about travelling. It's when I travelled, you didn't make any adjustments in your life for me. So like when you came to Belfast, you wanted to go to the gym, so I paid for a car for you to rent a car. But I don't drink tea or coffee, so I had tea and coffee and a French press for you in the house. I spent £70 in groceries. You wanted an ironing board, I bought you an ironing board.
It sounds more nuts and bolts. The complaint is around the specifics around money and expenses. It's interesting because I think if you're married, you would, I'm guessing it's deeper than that. There must have been just hurt feelings in general around I don't feel like you love me anymore, or you're not putting effort into this relationship, or something. These details became, because, if you felt in love and you felt very loved, it doesn't seem like these kinds of details would really make that much of a difference. It might bug you and you might have a conversation about it, but it wouldn't be the basis for divorce.
To have it mine. I was trying to do everything I could to make the relationship work, and I just feel like you made zero accommodations in your life for me or our relationship. It was.
Yeah, I'm guessing it has to do with the emotional messages that she was picking up on over time, that she felt like he just didn't love her and didn't care, or she was misinterpreting the difficulties. He's mentioning that because he has a gym, right? And he would lose his customer. So it sounds like his gym is also him, right? And so if he leaves, and as a therapist, I can relate to this, that when you're self-employed and the business is you, it's not like you own a McDonald's franchise or something and can walk away and leave the manager in charge. The business just isn't going to work. It does nothing unless you're there. And if you are going to spend a lot of time in Belfast, it's just money that you're losing. You don't get any vacation pay. You might even lose clients and come back to half the business, and then you can't pay your bills. It doesn't mean that his job is more important than hers, but I think he was trying to say that. So I wonder, yeah. And we didn't see much of them because they didn't have much drama. They didn't edit much of them in. We certainly didn't see any kind of issue between the two of them. So I just don't have a basis for hypothesizing here. They could both be at fault. He could have been pulling away as a defense or something, or he's a jerk face regarding accommodation. He thinks that she's supposed to do all the accommodating for him. I mean, there was a bit of that in their conversations. The way it seemed like he would say he's open to them discussing where they're going to live, but it seemed like he figured, well, we'll live in London.
Difficult because Stephen doesn't really like talking on the phone unless there's a reason for it, and isn't a big texter. So suddenly, when we weren't together, the communication just was not there.
What was it like when you were?
It's a great question. I don't know what that fella's name is, but that's a great question. We'll see what the answer is there. But yeah, we're hearing that it had to do with phone calls and texting. And again, I can't hypothesize about that. I mean, if he just refused, even though he could. But, some people, they might love you more than anything. And it is just impossible for them to pick up the phone and call you or text you. I've seen it. It's not common, but it's out there. So it could have been that. It could be avoidant attachment. It could be hurt feelings that he has, or he's a jerk face. I don't know. Or he's cheating on her. I don't know.
Every couple has their issues, but most of the time when we were together, it was fine.
Right.
Isn't that a contradiction of the story you just told prior to? We either were fine or we wasn't.
You made no adjustments for me. That's very different from when we were spending time together.
A lot of things that you're saying are not facts, right? Because the
You'd be
words that
wrong.
you're saying, I don't recognise who you are at the moment.
Huh. Interesting. So Stephen's saying, I don't recognize who you are. Where did this come from? Now, maybe she didn't feel comfortable to say this, or she got riled up in the ramp up to the reunion, because it's humiliating to get married and to have everyone look at them. And I don't think we've ever. I mean, we've only had only two other couples that even got divorced: Ayanna and Jarrett, and Danielle and Nick. And I don't know if they got divorced before or after the reunion. I feel like maybe they both did. So yeah, it doesn't happen very often. If you're Sabrina, you'd just rather that you just never got married in the first place, right? Or that you weren't included in the edit. But yeah, that's interesting. So Stephen seems to be reacting from a place of, wait, yeah, I thought we lost the spark, but I didn't realize that I was an asshole this whole time. That's not what you said before, or something like that. That seems to be where he's coming from.
2 days before you were meant to come to Belfast, you messaged me saying, hey, hon, don't think I can come to Belfast. Like 2 days before you're meant to be there. And with no respect for me, no consideration for my family and what my family had done, you literally said, shit happens, they'll get over it.
Also not true. I just need to give you a bit of insight because I will take account.
You know, you go through a divorce, it's rough. There's no way around it. It's looking like he pulled away from her, or she feels like he pulled away, and that's rough. That's terrible. It's a heartbreak, and it hasn't been that long, and you have to now sit on a stage with them and have a conversation with them. You know, it can get the blood boiling. So who knows what she would say if she were calm and not on stage. But there's also a possibility that she is overreactive and that she's preoccupied and that she's distorted, and she either is distorting what really happened, or she got hostile real quick and that led to them breaking up. I don't know. Or he's a jerkface and he's a psychopath and he's lying. and, you know, 1,000 other hypotheses.
Ability that I did not show up at Christmas because I managed my finances poorly. I had a lot going on at that Christmas, a hell of a lot, and she knows what happened in the family as well. Okay, I was really, really down. We had lost our, we hadn't lost our spark right at that point, maybe, but we weren't great like we was when we was dating every single day. And
okay, he's referring to something, I think, in his family that prevented him from coming to Belfast, and he was also struggling at work, and he said he was really down. It wasn't the way that she's characterizing it, like as if he's like, yeah, who cares? Shit happens, moving on. If I'm going to take a guess, I'm going to say that there was more of a back and forth and more understanding from her, because she's saying, I don't recognize you, meaning that at the time we were understanding each other. He's also saying that even by that point, the spark had been lost a little bit, which is really unfortunate, which makes me wonder if they really had enough spark to begin with. I don't know. I mean, long distance, I've done a deep dive-ish on long-distance relationships. You can search for it on the YouTube channel, I believe, in the audio podcast. And from my research, there's a lot that I can say about this. And what I'll say is that, according to research, the risk of breaking up and losing the spark will go up if you don't communicate very often. But the definition of communicating very often varies. Also, if you don't see each other in person, at least on some periodic basis, then that also raises the risk. It doesn't mean that you're doomed, but it just raises the risk. It seems that we as humans, if you're out of sight, then you're kind of out of mind, and the body and the neurons and the attachment just starts to fade over time, which makes sense, right? So that could have been a factor. But I'm also wondering if there was some fundamental incompatibility or distortion or trauma that was being played out in one or both of them. Because this doesn't sound like... plus, like, you just wouldn't think you would break up over that. You'd think you would give it a shot. And I don't know, so Christmas... So if this was... So that it sounds like they shot the show exactly a year ago, and we're in September or August is when this aired, I think. Anyway, so within 4 months after getting married, they were already losing a spark. I mean, that, you know, that kind of says something, right? I think. But I don't know relationships that are only that long. You know, at that point, by Christmas, they would have been apart longer than they had been together. You know? So I don't know if that would affect things more, but I don't think so, right? You know, if you just think about other couples, like if Amy and Johnny had to go through that. Plus, they did see each other because they did travel. At least she did. She says 7 times. He said twice. So they did see each other. You know. Actually, what I'm guessing is a factor here, total speculation, is that once things got to a certain point after Christmas, maybe a number of months, he was the one to initiate the breakup, and he had been losing the spark for a while, but she hadn't. And so, although she recognized that that would be best, it was very hurtful to her. Well, wait, she says she hasn't seen him in 8 months. So did they break up in January or something? But anyway, maybe she feels really, really hurt that he was, you know, she was willing to give it a shot. She was willing to try to make it work. And so she gets dumped, and then afterwards even though at the time she might have been cordial, the pain started to build, or the noticing of the pain started to happen. And she starts to kind of rewrite the history of like, he never loved me to begin with, or he tricked me, or he's a jerk face, when another story is that the distance apparently put a strain on their spark, especially for him. And he tried to keep it going, but it just died for whatever reason. I wonder what he would say to that. Now, it might sound like I'm trying to defend him. I have no idea. There's a total other narrative that he's a complete jerk face and he's lying right now. You know, that happens on the show. Some of the cast members will come across level-headed, but you'll hear later that, no, I'm trying to think, who was it that we were talking to? Was it Izzy or was it Jimmy? It was Jimmy. We saw interviews with Jimmy later on, Jimmy and Chelsea, that seemed to indicate that, you know, because Jimmy came across, from my memory, pretty well at the reunion, but then there were interviews with him after that seemed to indicate that he wasn't as level-headed. So, you know, maybe that's the same case here. I don't know. Either way, you know what this means. It means that Seattle still has the record with 3 married couples that are still married, as far as I know.
Episode's really, really difficult to watch, really emotional. You know, I went into the experiment with an open heart, open mind to meet my person, and I thought I had met my person. It was very triggering watching all of that back and seeing what it was at one point. So I find it incredibly difficult.
But you still.
The first 4 episodes, I watched it 3 times and I cried every single time.
Yeah, that must be quite a trip. I mean, regardless of what happens after the pods, just to... How often do we have the chance to watch an edit of our dating life and our intimate conversations with each other and falling in love and all that kind of stuff? To watch yourself falling in love with someone and to see your partner in the best of lights and then you're now divorced. Yeah. But just think about that. If we had a time machine and we could be invisible and a fly in the wall and just watch us date people from our past, that would be mind-blowing, right?
I can see where my shortcomings are. I'm not always positive, but I try to get there in the end, you know? And so maybe there was this expectation. When you're dating, it's being paid for. You're in picturesque places. You're falling in love rapidly. That's the best version of you no matter what. You haven't got to worry about what time the alarm is.
Kind of sounds like he's referencing himself having anxiety and maybe depression, stress. He's saying that in the pods and at the getaway in Corfu that he wasn't working and or what was being filmed or what was being edited in was this carefree guy. But it sounds, because he referenced that he was really down over Christmas, and that was part of why he couldn't come to Belfast. And it also kind of looks like Sabrina is taking this in.
Is the next day, where the next penny is coming from, why your partner might be upset, and is it something that you've done, or you don't have to worry about any of those things. So everything changes. That's the real world. That was the one thing we wasn't exposed.
There seems to be a lot more talk about money and income. I don't know if it's just the random sampling of the cast, or if it has something to do with the UK, or if it has something to do with their age, which seems to me the most likely factor, in that for the US versions, the average age is mid-20s, late 20s. And of course, money is a thing at that point, but this is a total generalization. But I think a lot of people in their 20s are pretty content with living in pretty suboptimal living conditions, you know? You start to get in your 30s and you start thinking about kids and family, you start having expectations about things, and you start taking risks about opening up your own business, and you start getting a lot more stressed out. You start looking at your friends that you grew up with who are your age that are more secure financially, and it starts to take a toll. I don't know. That isn't a generalization that I'm comfortable with, but there just seems to be a lot more talk along those lines. But anyway, we're hearing from him that he has a lot of stress and that it gets him down and that he gets very anxious. And I think he's saying that was a major factor in putting a wedge between him and Sabrina. And it kind of looks like Sabrina is hearing this and might be swayed a little bit of like, oh, because he also just talked for a while about how the show makes him look like a perfect person. And he's like, I'm not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person.
So that and the distance. So the distance then created, when there was a small problem, it become a big problem. And Sabrina's walls can go up really quickly when there is conflict.
Okay, so this is all kind of fitting into the loose hypothesis that I had. There's other hypotheses that this would fit, but this fits with what I was saying earlier, that when he would be distant, it would cause her to get upset and then hostile, and then the walls would go up. And maybe in the beginning it was just a little bit, and he would do a little bit of this, and then it would just exaggerate over time.
And so with that distance, it became harder.
For me, the change in you, Stephen, was so dramatic. And you might not realise that, but I understand things were difficult for you after, and I really did try and support you, and I did.
Yeah, it's good. They seem to be more listening to each other and giving each other the benefit of the doubt because he was vulnerable. We can use this as a jumping off point that if you're ever in conflict with someone's being hostile with you, not always, of course, case-by-case basis, but often the road to wellness, the road to getting the person to not be hostile with you is to be vulnerable. This is true also in politics, I will say. I won't go into specifics, but if we continue to feel attacked and then we go on the attack and then we feel attacked and we go on the attack, then everyone just spins out of control. Whereas if we just say, hey, that hurts, or when you act that way, it kind of scares me because it makes me feel like you're going to vote this way or you're going to push our country this way, and that worries me because of this, and I'm hurt by that or something. There's a much greater chance that by communicating that people will have empathy, and they might not agree with you in the end, but there's a much greater chance that they will and incorporate your feelings into their decision making, whether it be a marriage or a divorced marriage or in politics.
Everything to try and be the perfect person, bubbly at your side, and you shot me down constantly. For me, I just actually want to know why you said yes, because I just feel like you're Foz, you're a man of many words.
Yeah, I think she has written history, and people do this, such that she believes he never loved her and that he betrayed her or tricked her or something. And maybe he did, but I doubt he did. And so I think he's about to hopefully clear that up, that he did love her. And maybe they haven't had those conversations. I talk about ethical dumping of people. And one of the things, case-by-case basis, of course, if you break up with someone and they're abusive to you, then all bets are off. But if they're not being abusive to you, then you want to put effort into making sure that the person that you're dumping does not adopt a distorted narrative that says that you never loved them. Now, maybe you fell out of love. You know, if you were together for 20 years and when you think about it, you're like, yeah, I probably fell out of love the last year, then you can mention that, and that might hurt, but that's a much better narrative than, for the dumpee, it's a much better narrative than I was tricked for 20 years.
But not a man off your word, because you did not stick to those vows at all. And I would just like to
I could
understand.
say the same for yours as well. I don't mind you saying he didn't do X, Y, and Z. That's fine, but half of this is lies.
No,
Shall we stop it there? Thank you both.
I wonder if the UK, I don't know if this is a cultural thing or if this just reflects the difference in production decisions, but I'm guessing in the States they would have let that play out a little bit longer. I mean, this is just a stereotype, but the stereotype is that for people in the UK, they want to sweep things under the rug. I mean, the United States as well, but maybe less so or something. I don't know, just a different style. Or I'm just reading into it. But whenever things get kind of juicy and interesting, or maybe it would have just continued to go on in that way and it would have wasted time and there wouldn't have been any interesting bits of information. But I feel like I was curious as to where that was headed. And I guess I should get out ahead of this, that a good portion of my ancestry is from the UK, from England, Scotland, Wales, actually a lot of Welsh, and Ireland. So I don't know if that matters to y'all. My people came over in the 1600s and the 1700s, and in the 1800s, it was mainly my Swedish side. But my mom is a fourth Swedish, so that makes me an eighth Swedish, and I'm half Japanese, and it's all half Japanese, right? Because it's more of a monoculture there. I don't know if that matters to people. But any kind of shit talking that I do about the UK culture, I'm 3/8 shit talking myself. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.